we're living in a moment of profound change where things are going to tip very dramatically in the coming years. Employers are increasingly seeing the benefits of providing these healthcare benefits outside of the traditional acute healthcare, and people are increasingly coming to demand them.
Hello, Kathy here. Thanks for joining us today. In this, our inaugural episode, I'm delighted to have Mridula Pore join me, co-founder and co-CEO of Peppy. Today, we're going to delve into the roots of Peppy, discuss the vital role that employers play in resolving the healthcare crisis. Hopefully, we'll gain some insight from Mridula and discuss why these conversations are so crucial. Welcome, Mridula.
Hi, Kathy.
Hi, Mridula. Can you give us a brief overview of your background? Tell us a little bit more about what Peppy is and why you decided to start that business.
I started off life as actually an engineer, a research engineer to begin with in the pharma sector, but then came into healthcare. I mean, all my family work in healthcare, so I grew up around the NHS and various other healthcare organizations, but I came into it professionally, started with my work at McKinsey. So I was a management consultant consulting to healthcare regulators, providers, including NHS hospital systems or regional healthcare systems, as well as the pharma sector. And I completely fell in love with the space because there is so much work to be done. I'm just seeing the challenge of, as a society, whether that's in the UK, where I was based primarily, or anywhere else in the world, the need for healthcare is far outstripping our ability to supply it. And so, it's just a very intriguing space and a space in which there's, a lot of good work that can be done. After that, I spent some time in the corporate world. So I was with a business unit head at Sandoz, a Novartis company, and then was ready to take the leap into the startup world after having my kids as well in the corporate world, just seeing the need for that kind of support system around critical life stages and these very common, very normal, health journeys that we all go on, most of us, at multiple stages in our lives, which traditional healthcare just isn't set up to solve. And that's really what we're aiming to do at Peppy, is recognizing that there is a bit of a gap. I call it the gap between the kitchen table and the doctor's door, where there's lots of things going on in our health. We may talk about them with our best friends, our siblings, our parents, our spouses, but actually what we could really benefit from is expert clinical support that helps us understand what's going on, what our options are, when to seek proper treatment, medical or surgical interventions, and help us really navigate these tricky stages which don't feel normal at all.
Thank you, Mridula. So each week we're going to be breaking up our podcast into different sections. And in this first one, we're going to talk about some common myths related to healthcare in the workplace. So, Mridula, what would you say is the most common misconception that you hear about the employer's role in supporting healthcare?
I think the most common myth is that the employer doesn't have a role in supporting healthcare, especially from a UK perspective. I mean, obviously, depending on where you are in the world, employers take a differing level of role in terms of providing you with your healthcare provision, paying for your healthcare provision. But in reality it's always been in the employer's interests to have a healthy, productive workforce who can focus on their work. And, we saw that, in the Victorian ages, the likes of, the sort of more paternalistic, Lever Brothers or Cadbury's villages where they would have on-site provision of housing and healthcare, very paternalistic view of the world, which has obviously changed. But then, we had the NHS where that became the main source for our healthcare. The reality is, the NHS is doing a fantastic job at providing a whole range of healthcare, but they cannot cover everything. Increasingly, as I said, we're an aging society. We're all living and working for longer. Our healthcare needs are evolving. It is in the employer's interests to make sure that employees have what they need so that they can continue to work, and be productive and be engaged in the workplace.
But what about when we start talking about topics which are perhaps a little bit more sensitive, things like menopause issues, erectile dysfunction, men's health, menstrual issues, periods, heavy menstrual bleeding, incontinence, the list goes on. These are very personal. Are they really business issues too?
Yeah, I can completely see where that question's coming from, but the reality is, I call it the problem hiding in plain sight. If we think about, what takes somebody up out of the workplace, people often think of the more acute, dramatic events, somebody having a heart attack, somebody having a cancer diagnosis, which, is a health issue that takes people out of the workplace. But if you actually look at the numbers and the prevalence of these issues, the impact it can have on someone's quality of life, their ability to show up to work sometimes, it's astonishing. It's astonishing how widespread they are. And certainly, I think one of the privileges that I have as being a founder at Peppy, and I'm sure, you have all the time when you go and also talk to organizations or groups of people, is the stories just come pouring out, and they are everywhere you look. So, they are a business issue because they are real, they are frequent, and it's amazing when you open the door to the topic, just how many people really want to jump into that conversation and engage with it when they're sort of given permission to do so.
Definitely. And I know there's one statistic which is quite impressive, really, which is that of the people who came to Peppy for menopause support, 3/4 told us that they had already considered reducing their hours or quitting their jobs. So that really does make it a business issue, doesn't it?
If you think about that, how many of those people have actually had that conversation with, an HR manager or a line manager? Probably not. How many people have had that conversation, maybe with their domestic partner? Maybe not. Then where does that lead? Some proportion of those people would otherwise have just handed in their notice, with not the full explanation, not maybe themselves even understanding what's going on, but they might just feel, it was all a bit too much. It was all a bit stressful. It's all a bit overwhelming. I can't, I'm getting on. You hear these phrases a lot. Whereas actually, for that 74% of people, we know that we can show a significant reduction in their symptoms, which translates into a feeling of empowerment and confidence to make the decision that's actually right for them without it being overshadowed by physical, mental, and, other symptoms that just feel unmanageable.
So we're recording this today at a time when the world, I would say, is in a state of financial turmoil. I think you'd probably agree. Employees are tightening their purse strings. It's a difficult time for us all. Do you think employee healthcare is actually too expensive? Is it a luxury for employers to be offering?
Yeah, there's certainly, a view that says that. The reality is, though, while we're facing financial turmoil, we're also facing a talent gap and a talent shortage. We are all living and working for longer. Organizations also need us to live and work for longer to be able to have the skilled workforce of the future. So the question really becomes, do you look at it as an expense or do you look at it as an investment for your business? Because investing in employee healthcare not only can deliver immediate benefits in terms of reduced absenteeism, reduced presenteeism, retention, but also drive much broader things about employee engagement, your employer brand value proposition to maybe talent you're looking to attract. And increasingly, I think organizations are realizing that without embracing a diverse, multi-generational workforce, they're not going to be able to put bums on seats, right? And then that hurts your business far, far more than not making those investments. So I think they should, rather than thinking of it as a perk, which maybe, some employers have done in the past, think of it as part of the investment you make in your people strategy. And I think that's, that would be my advice to organizations today.
Thank you. So really what we're suggesting is that organisations should be thinking it from a reverse, which is what are the risks of not doing this to us as an organisation? Exactly. It's great to support people, but actually there's sound business sense in going further too.
Yeah, absolutely.
Could you share with us your own journey that led to Peppy and the areas of health which you feel and that you've seen impact the workforce firsthand?
Yeah, of course. So like I said, I was a mother of two very young children when we started Peppy, Kathy, you'll remember my, ups and downs of that journey being a startup founder, as well as a young mum. So I had very freshly come off that experience of going on maternity leave and returning to work, once changing jobs as well in between babies. And that memory was, very, very vivid for me, both personally as well as with the team. I managed a team of about 30 people. A number of people had gone off on parental leave and come back. And that's kind of where we started. Max also had, young children at the time. And it was a shared experience between us as founders. I think the other thing that happened was, the data started to come out showing the gender pay gap results across multiple geographies, that actually the gender pay gap is non-existent until the birth of the first child. It then emerges and persists well into the future. So that's kind of where we started. But that gave us a calling card, really, to go and talk to organizations about what was going on with their people and what health issues were on their mind. And so those conversations very quickly led us to menopause, which is, obviously when you joined the team, and we really created the world's first specialist-led menopause employee benefit here in the UK, working with clients such as Santander, Aviva, and others. But then, the list very quickly grew, because once you start talking, like I said earlier, the stories just keep pouring out from people's personal experience, a recent situation they had, that their HR team had to deal with, something that happened with one of their senior business leaders recently. And you see these situations. I mean, I think my best guess is that people experience a disruptive health episode like this every 3 to 5 years, regardless of their reproductive choices, either their own or that of a loved one. And that was a big aha moment. This is not a niche thing. This is not a nice CSR thing. This is a population thing. And so once you have an organization of any size, these issues are there. We can guarantee them. We're now pretty good, right, at estimating what the prevalence of different issues are going to be within an employer's population. And then that led us obviously into conversations and partnerships with health insurance companies, organizations across multiple different geographies, including the US and beyond.
Yeah, it's interesting, isn't it? I think as well that the concept that we come to work and just do our job has changed completely. I mean, we bring everything to work. We bring our health conditions to work. We bring our menopause symptoms to work. If we've got children at home, we bring the emotions of having that to work as well. So I think it's really important that workplaces do remember that to bring our best to work means looking at all those other issues as well. Mridula, in this next question, we're going to put you on the spot, if that's okay. And we haven't got a lot of time left. But I'd love to know if you can give me, say, your top 3 reasons why employers should really step up their game in terms of healthcare.
I think firstly, it's part of being a modern employer. We're an aging society. People are living and working for longer with non-linear career paths. And employers have to embrace that and recognize, that the worker of the future is less likely to be a 28-year-old fit and healthy young male, much more likely to be a midlife person with all the messiness of real life and, your health that comes with that. I think the second thing is to stay competitive. It has a, positive impact on morale. It becomes a talking point in organizations, has been our experience at Peppy. I recently met a friend who actually also has Peppy in the workplace, and she was saying, it's a topic of conversation. And that changes the organization's culture, as well as it changes the messaging to the outside world of what kind of employer we are. And I think the third thing is because it makes financial sense. We know often the cost of Peppy, you will redeem that in the cost of, hiring a couple of mid-level staff members. If you're say a professional services organization, that is a small price to pay for all the other benefits that you get, and for the fact that you can actually make genuinely life-changing support. You can provide life-changing support for those employees in that year who are really going through some tough times.
Thank you. And what would you say is the most surprising thing you've learned about workplace health?
Yeah, so actually, there's a lot of interest in this at the policy level. And I read a report recently which blew my mind. So the UK has lost 500,000 workers since the beginning of the pandemic. And there is pretty strong evidence to suggest that this is to do with physical and mental health related issues, not just because people, fancy taking their foot off the pedal and feel like they have enough savings. The numbers are staggering. So it is estimated that this has cost our companies £5.2 billion in lost productivity. It's cost the Treasury £3.7 billion. And welfare costs like housing and income support are up by 6.8 billion. I mean, this is massive on a societal level as well as the individual organization level. And so, I think we're living in a very, very interesting time for healthcare in the workplace, given where we're at in terms of our thinking around the role of employers, what's happening with our healthcare systems, and obviously, as you mentioned, the financial situation that we're living in.
Yeah, that's some profound statistics, isn't it? Mridula, if you had a crystal ball, what would you say is the next big thing on the horizon for employee healthcare?
Ooh, if I had a crystal ball, I would be a very lucky person indeed. But I think, like I said, I think we're living in a moment of profound change where things are going to tip very dramatically in the coming years. Employers are increasingly seeing the benefits of providing these healthcare benefits outside of the traditional acute healthcare, and people are increasingly coming to demand them. Employees are increasingly demanding them as well. I think we will see a tipping point within the next 24 months in terms of how that healthcare system, works around employees and what the general expectation starts to be.
That's really interesting, and that brings us back really to what you were saying earlier about the risks of not doing this going forward. But let me present to you a scenario here. So let's just say that you're the HR manager. You're trying to build a business case for menopause support. Very important. We've heard some of the financial statistics, but you're presenting to an all-male board of decision makers. So quite a difficult task. Can you suggest 3 things that perhaps you could be bringing to that meeting to be convincing?
Absolutely. Sure. I think first of all, the numbers, they're sort of irrefutable. The stats, the prevalence of, what your population might look like. I mean, we've worked with organizations where as many as 1 in 6 of their staff are female in the age where they're most likely to be experiencing menopause symptoms, highlighting facts like that. Or maybe within certain pockets of your organization. We know, for example, in a lot of law firms, legal secretarial support, which can be a big chunk of the workforce, can often be sort of prime demographic as well. The second one is stories. And here, I think don't underestimate actually how much men know or don't know about menopause. They will certainly be aware of it. They may not know a lot about the details, but that doesn't mean that they don't have personal experience of their partners, siblings, daughters, mothers. So bringing the personal stories, I have often, I've pitched to male investors and you see faces change a little and there's a story there. Whether that's them dealing with mood swings, irritability, other health issues, they don't talk about it at all. So don't underestimate the impact of introducing personal stories, because you may also solicit them from that group. And I think the third thing is success stories. We are seeing adoption of these services across multiple organizations, multiple sectors. I mean, at Peppy, we work with law firms, banks, retailers, construction companies, NHS trusts, all sorts of organizations. So, look at the organizations who you're maybe competing with, who are your suppliers, who are your clients. Share those success stories because we are seeing, rapidly increasing uptake of menopause support throughout the workplace.
Thanks, that's some great tips there. We're coming to the end, Mridula, but thank you very much for speaking to me today. I guess if we were to think about some of the summaries from what you've said today, one would be this mixture of the myths and realities. So people and employers often believe that they're providing enough in the healthcare space, but actually they could be missing some really important areas. So we need to try and debunk the misconception that perhaps enough is being done. You mentioned as well about cost. I mean, it is a costly business to offer good healthcare. We know that it may look expensive, but we've turned it upside down a little and said we need to think about the risk of not offering it. And employers need to be thinking about that risk as well as the actual cost. And you said yourself, you used the words, it needs to be considered as an investment rather than as an expense. We also talked about issues which are quite personal, and we mentioned specifically both men's and women's health issues. And understanding that these, although they are personal, it's true they are personal issues, but they do affect business. People bring everything to work, including all their personal health issues as well. And so they should become a point for employers to focus on and to improve the situation for their colleagues. And then I think you also highlighted the need for a modern workplace. So times have changed, and you made that prediction that maybe in the next 24 months we're going to see a big transition towards a different kind of health structure. And in the workplace, it's going to become even more important to not just look at productivity, but also to morale and work satisfaction because of the future of both healthcare, but also of employment. And finally, you talked about data. You talked about employers having the data there to give a compelling case for supporting these sensitive areas like menopause and men's health and other areas as well. So thank you very much, Mridula. I think that it's been very interesting to have your insights and to hear your personal story as well. Any closing thoughts from you, Mridula?
No, I mean, I think it's, like I said, this is a fantastic time to be doing this, and it's such a privilege that we have here as part of the Peppy team to see this evolution that's happening in the space in the UK, the US and beyond.
Thank you. And thank you everyone for joining me today on Pep Talks Health Matters at Work. If, like us, you love talking about everything health and work related, then hit subscribe, leave a review and please spread the word. Your feedback will drive our content. And if there's a topic that you would really like to cover, then please just let us know. Next week, I'm going to be joined by Anne, an expert in fertility and women's health. And in honour of Polycystic Ovary Syndrome Awareness Month in September, she'll be talking all things PCOS and how it can impact people at work. And it's probably more than you might be thinking. So until then, thank you, and let's continue to make health matter at work.